Happy post-eclipse. We all survived. You may have seen a video I posted yesterday about the Law of Polarity. And of course, this is part of the universal laws, and adhering and understanding universal laws is a way to make life easier and more joyful. Everything in terms of the law of polarity and what I was talking about yesterday is that everything has an opposite: good and evil, positive and negative, love and fear, cold and warm. We can go on and on and on about that because there's many of them. But the law of polarity, what I brought up yesterday was that the eclipse is a great time to consider the law of polarity and how it arises in ourselves. So, seeing the positive and negative, the harder parts of ourselves that are more difficult to look at, and bringing those to light and giving them an opportunity to be seen, understood, understand where they come from, and heal them. So I hope some of you did that work yesterday. I know for me that I was really angry yesterday. So the eclipse was definitely bringing up some of those pieces of myself. Another thing I want to talk about is I have a new tool, particularly for deep work. So, creative endeavors, just working through your day. If you work in an office, maybe anything that needs sustained focus, maybe anything that you're even procrastinating on doing. I often find myself distracted during my tedious work and during my work day. And so, the tool that I've been using is called Brain.fm. You may have heard of this before. They talk about it a lot on different podcasts, and it is science-backed music. It's designed by neuroscientists and music engineers, and it uses rhythmic pulses to stimulate your brain, and that supports sustained attention. So it's exciting because I reached out to them, letting them know that I had been using and wanted to offer it to my community. And so I have a special link that you can use. It actually gives you a 30-day trial with my link. And then you just go back to my link in order to sign up. And so it's just brain.fm/sound science soul. I'll put it in the description as well. But that's pretty exciting because the normal trial period is either 3 or 7 days. I think it's 7 days, maybe with a credit card or something, and 3 days if not. Something like that. But you get 30 days if you use my link. You will find a Delta sleep meditation now on the channel, and there is the music that is used in that is also a separate video on the channel as well. So you can either use the meditation or just use the music. There will be more of those coming. So I have more sleep meditations and accompanying music that you'll start seeing appear on the channel. And these are not only for better sleep, but for more mystical experiences too. So things like access to your guides, accessing the hypnagogic state, which we've talked about before, out of body experiences, astral projection, etc. These intuitive abilities are all within us. There are beliefs that these abilities have been suppressed in part because earlier versions of humanity would have needed intuitive abilities to find food, for example. But we don't rely on these as much because of technology. And as more technology advanced, we didn't need as much intuition ability. But there's also a belief that since those with the highest abilities were persecuted, which is interesting because while those with higher abilities are not necessarily persecuted today, they are looked down upon in conventional society as weird or even wrong. So they're always questioned. But, anyways, a belief in those with higher abilities were persecuted. The belief is that those with higher abilities were persecuted. And then, as a survival mechanism, we evolved with less intuitive abilities because we wouldn't have survived if not. So then the expansion of Christianity is believed to be another reason why we rely less on intuition as well. Multiple reasons. Another interesting fact about psychic abilities is that the research into psychic abilities has shown that those with childhood trauma have higher abilities. So the belief being that they had to become hypervigilant as a protective measure. But also, I'd be curious to understand how many of them might have had an out-of-body experience during an episode of trauma. That's something that I experienced myself. And once you leave the body, it becomes easier to leave it again. So you actually learn that skill, and then it's easier to do it once you know that it exists and that you can do it. I had the pleasure recently to meet Mark Serto, and you may not know who he is, but he was Robert Monroe's sound engineer. And so he worked with Robert Monroe. And if you don't know who Robert Monroe is, we've talked about him before, but he is the person who worked with the CIA in developing binaural beats and other technologies and things to help them do remote viewing and astral projection and out of body experiences. Mark Serto was the sound engineer that worked with Robert in later years to develop binaural beats. Robert Monroe, did this program, of course, with the CIA, and Mark came on later after that program was already done. But that Mark also has just another note here. He has a podcast called Expanding on Consciousness. And the third episode is a conversation with Robert Monroe. So I really suggest you listen to that because I just recently did, and it's really cool. But one of the, just another note here, one of the downfalls of that program I've heard Mark say is that it was the heart brain coherence issue. And so Joe Dispenza uses this concept as the basis of his work too. But, it's basically that once you are able to kind of access your brain and deeper parts or whatever, then your heart and brain become connected and there's this whole coherence thing. And then it makes it very hard to use these practices as a weapon because you're coming from your heart as well as your mind. And so that is what I understand was the reason that that program was not successful because it was to weaponize those abilities. And that was not very easy to do. So, anyways, more about Mark. He's a sound engineer, that worked with Robert Monroe, and I had an opportunity to connect with him, and it was just a really neat conversation. I really enjoyed meeting him and his heart, and he has some incredible programs going on where he's teaching people about the conscious and superconscious and unconscious and or subconscious, and you can just tell that he has a really good heart and that he uses his practices for our evolution, for our greater good. So, just wonderful. It was such an honor to be able to meet someone that had worked with Robert, that is involved in this work and is, really he's a mentor, I guess. I would say he's a guide in this space. So, speaking about podcasts, you can also find our meditations on Spotify on our own podcast. Just look for Sound Science Soul. We actually have a couple channels on Spotify because we have our Spotify podcast and then we also have a separate artist channel. So, you can find various meditations on both of those. Recently, I was on the John Silva live stream. It was on Twitch and YouTube. John is a psychology student, and which was interesting. We talked about brain states and mysticism, but to talk about it with somebody who's in the psychology realm, apparently they're bringing a lot of the mysticism into psychology now. So there's actually some various organizations that are starting that are all about, those mysticism and bringing it into teaching psychology and everything. So, anyways, go check that out if you would like. It is definitely on YouTube. I don't know anything about Twitch. I've never been on Twitch. So, we were live on both of those. I know you can see the replay on YouTube. I do not know if you can see it on Twitch. So, if you know, you know. Another thing, I have another surgery next week, and this is my third in about a year. I have talked about this in the past that I used sound in my surgery. And in the first surgery, I had this amazing experience. It just prepared my body so well. And I felt safe. I felt that it was part of the healing, that it prepared my body, put my body into a parasympathetic, you know, state. And it was very effective in that first surgery. And then the second surgery, I worked with a different surgeon, and there were other extenuating circumstances where I could not get on top of I could not get on top of the experience. I had a trauma response essentially in that experience. And so the sound was not effective in that situation, but there were other things that impacted that, which we always have to consider that there's always, our ego gets in the way of things, our responses, if we're reactive. So, anyways, I'm working with the same surgeon this time that I worked with the first time. So, I have high hopes that I will have a really good experience. But in the first instance, I just kind of grabbed something off of YouTube, found something that I resonated with. And in this experience, I'm working on something very particular and I'm still working on it. So, I will report my findings and let you know what I ended up using and how effective it was so that you can use that in your own experience. So I think that's all I got for today. Just a little update on what's going on. And would love to hear from any of you when you want to reach out as you have questions, leave comments, of course. Follow me everywhere you can find me Instagram, Spotify, those are kind of the main places. I'm sure there's other places I'm at too. And I am starting a Telegram specifically for Sound Science Soul people, but it is a private Telegram. And so it will only be open to certain individuals. Mainly, this means go sign up for my email list. So you can find me there too. So if you go to my website, soundsciencesoul.com, you can sign up for the email list there. If you go to my store and you purchase anything, even the free download, you will be signed up on the email list automatically too. So go to the store, see if there's anything you'd like, or just grab a free download. And there you go. Have a great day. Hope everyone is doing well.